of the England-Scotland match tomorrow. Oh, right, sorry.
No worries. Okay. Hi, everybody. We're just talking about what we're talking about. We're talking about a bit of football, but we're mainly talking about cricket. It's Cricket Tonight, the Cricket Fan Show. Welcome, everybody who's joining us. It's Matt here, Steve, the cricket guys here as always. Good to see you.
Good evening, Matt. Good evening. Great to see you, mate. I'm ready for it this evening. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, good. It's a bumper edition. And Tony the Legend, you all right?
I'm fine, thank you, Matt.
Good. And just as has been alluded to by Tony at the top of the show, Euros 2021 is on. It's actually Euros 2020, a year behind. But the boys are not here to talk about Euro 2020. They're here to talk about loads and loads and loads to talk about with the cricket. There's so much going on with the cricket. So let's get straight into it. Steve, take it away. Talk about England versus New Zealand. Off you go.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah, well, the first place to start tonight, and I know Tony's got lots to say about this, was the England-New Zealand second Test match in the Test series that just concluded with the New Zealand incredibly comfortable win against I would have to say, Tony, a pretty poor England side in the end in that Test. Let's go through that. Let's see if we can start with some positives. From that series and that Test, Tony, was there anything positive you took out of that from an England perspective?
I took one positive, which I thought was very good for the future, and that was that our pace bowlers, and that includes the poor man who has got dropped for his indiscretions, Robinson. But I thought that Stone, Broad, Anderson, and Wood all bowled very, very well indeed. And when you think of the players like Wokes and Sam Curran who weren't playing, I think we're very well equipped in the pace bowling department.
Yeah, not to mention Jofra, of course, as well. Yeah. Jofra Archer too.
Jofra, yes, I've forgotten him because he's been out for so long. That's true. Mm-hmm. That's about, sadly, however, and I must be honest, because it's our duty, I think, as pundits or whatever we like to call ourselves, to be honest. I can't find any mollifying words for the rest of it. I thought it was rubbish.
Yeah. And before we move on from the bowlers, I just had a look at the averages for this. It was only two matches, but nonetheless. So Robinson took 7 wickets at 14 in one Test, obviously. Yeah. Broad took 6 wickets at 29, which was a great relief for him because he'd gone a huge number of overs without taking a wicket for England in India. So that was good. Stone took 3 wickets for 32. At 32, I should say, and Wood took 6 wickets at 34. Now, I don't know if you spotted this, Tony. Jimmy Anderson, 3 wickets at 68 or nearly 69. Yeah. He bowled over 77 overs, which was more than Broad. He bowled 11 overs more than Broad. And so his strike rate was actually a wicket every 155 balls. I mean, the next highest, if you like, was Wood with a wicket every 59 balls. So I would have to say Jimmy was probably the least effective of the quick bowlers in those games. I think that's possibly a question if he didn't quite get the reward that some of his bowling spells deserved. Do you think?
I thought he bowled well. I thought the wicket, whilst if you looked at it superficially, it looked to suit him. But the second wicket was a slow wicket, and it was difficult for him to get enough pace with his swing to become a dangerous bowler. But still, I thought. I mean, look, he's 38. He's nearly 39. He's going to have the odd day where he's maybe a little bit off key. I don't worry about it. I think that what he's reaching the stage in his career now where he has to be managed, and perhaps he bowled too many overs. Mm-hmm. I noticed that Root virtually spread the overs between the 4 pacemen, and we'll come to the pathetic selection policy in a minute. But I think that Root did well in his own eyes in that he spread the overs between the 4 pacemen virtually equally. Mm-hmm. And maybe he should have saved. It was particularly noticeable, I think, when the new ball was taken towards the end of the day. Yeah. We were not as effective with it because Anderson and Broad, to a certain extent, were probably tired after a full day in the field, and Anderson had bowled a fair few overs. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't criticise Root. God knows he's got enough pressures on the poor man at the moment. But maybe he could have given Anderson a little bit more of a rest.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it was interesting. I saw he was trying to spread the load around, which was interesting. But yeah, okay. As you were chomping at the bit to get onto the less positive things, shall we say?
No, not chomping at the bit. I'm sad. I feel very sad, but I think that it's all gone wrong since we started rotation. Let's put it bluntly. We had a selection of wins. We went to Sri Lanka. I won't say we had 2 wins in Sri Lanka, albeit there was an element of fortune in it, in one of them certainly. And then we had one in the first test in India, in Chennai, and then rotation kicked in. And we lost Bairstow, we lost Butler, we lost Wokes, we lost Stokes. I don't know how many people we lost. Now, okay, it's all very well to give new people a chance, but there are 2 things about that. You have to pick and choose when you give them a chance. To give them a chance in the hardest place in the world to go and play cricket, which is the Indian subcontinent, and then to give them a chance when the team is beginning to lose after a good run, to my mind, puts unnecessary stress upon the ones coming in. But what happened was we lost our mojo. And what I'm extra fearful for, and it's continued into this series against New Zealand, we're putting extra pressure on Joe Root. He is by streets ahead our best batsman. He is the captain. We have not picked a spinner for either of the 2 tests against New Zealand. So he's had to bowl somewhere in the region of 35 overs in the 2 matches. He's fielding at first slip, which is the most, next to wicketkeeper, one of the most concentrating places you have to field. He has started just to drop a couple of catches. I noticed in the last 2 innings, he was not as fluent scoring. He was concentrating, if you like, on staying in. And the reason for that is that he's surrounded by batsmen who've been picked who are A, out of form, and B, I'm not convinced, good enough. And I worry that if we carry on like this, we will ruin Joe Root, and that would be a disaster for England.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. So let's talk about that. And in one particular point about the selection was England not picking a spinner in either of those 2 tests, despite oddly adding Dominic Best to the squad for the second test, which was very strange. If they had no intention of playing a spinner at all, then that was a very odd thing to do. I think England struggled throughout, well, in both of those tests, to find any semblance of balance in their team at all. And I thought we ended up with Wood batting too high. We ended up with not enough in the middle order, and we had many too many inexperienced players joining each other at the crease in most Test matches as well. And there wasn't a lot of experience through the team, except obviously when you got to numbers 10 and 11, who had more experience than anybody put together. But it was a funny thing, wasn't it? The selections. I couldn't really understand why they didn't pick a spinner.
Well, I could excuse it in the first test because we were still in the early part of the season, so to speak, and it was obvious that the wicket was going to be a paceman's wicket. I found it baffling in the second when lessons learned from the first test should have been that we needed a spinner, A, for variety, and B, to bottle up one end to give the pace bowlers. And it's interesting that we're talking about Anderson not performing too well and perhaps bowling too many overs because he had to take his share of the load. And I do feel that it was a mistake not to pick a spinner. One of the other things I have to say is, whilst it was right to give Messrs Burns, Sibley, Crawley and Pope the chance to prove themselves, one had to look. Burns played reasonably well, and I have to say that, despite his quirky technique, he played reasonably well. But I felt that certainly two of the three, in Sibley and Crawley, their technique was shown to be flawed. Let's face it, there is a vogue now where batsmen take middle and off, or even off stump, to attempt to know where their off stump is so they can leave the ball. Total nonsense. All that happens is that 80% of the time you're playing across the line because you're playing from off to leg all the time. And it is noticeable that Sibley, in particular, scores the predominance of his runs on the leg side, and he's playing across the ball all the time. Despite taking middle and off, what happened? We played down the line, we drove or fluffed balls outside the off stump and got caught behind or caught in the slips. And I gave you a stat that, a couple of weeks ago where slip catching, New Zealand catch over 90% of their chances, and England only catch 70% of theirs. That's a vast difference. It's an old adage that catches win matches, but it's particularly true where slip catches are concerned if you're playing an all-pace attack. And I feel that Pope, he is another enigma. He gets good starts, and then his eyes seem to light up. He seems to suddenly think, oh, I'm in a one-day match here. And he starts playing a one-day innings, having played himself in, and gets out to unnecessary shots. Somebody's got to not whisper in his ear, shout in his ear. You're playing a test match. You're playing in a test match. You do not have to score runs quickly. You need to score 400 runs in a day and 3 quarters, something like that, in your first test innings.
Yeah.
Lawrence?
Yeah, I think Pope's interesting. I mean, they've clearly invested in Pope. They really obviously believe Pope is a future mainstay of the side.
He's highly talented. There's no escaping that. He's talented.
There must be a number of batsmen around the counties who've had their flirtations with the England team, with the England Test team, played a few games and then been discarded, whether it's your Lyth or your Robson or your David Milan or your many others.
I was going to say David Milan is a classic chance. I think he should be in the team. I think his solidity at the top of the order, batting at number 3 to give. Again, I mean, we've got what we've got. We've got Root coming in, God help him. And what are we, 30, 40 for 2 at best? Yeah. You know, it's not good enough. And then we had Lawrence at 6. Now, I'm an Essex man and I'm a Lawrence fan. But with Lawrence, if he gets over the first 15 overs, you can breathe a sigh of relief. But in Test cricket, 2 out of 3, he won't get past the first 15 overs. He's an appalling starter, and it's in my opinion too much of a risk if you're relying upon him for a lot of runs. He might come off 1 innings in 3, and that's about his average, in my opinion.
It's not really the hallmark of somebody who's got aspirations to bat in a Test top 3, which I guess is probably what you would hope that Lawrence would mature into a number 3 batsman.
Or when they picked him in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah. No, and you're dead right. I think about. I mean, Burns, I thought did pretty well, and I was no surprise that he was the England man of the series, for what that's worth in 2 tests. But he did score runs, and he did everything that was asked of him, and he occupied the crease. Sibley and Crawley both looked like they were struggling at this level. I mean, you know, New Zealand have got a very, very good pace attack, and we're going to talk about the World Test Championship final in a bit, and we'll focus a bit on New Zealand and their strengths then. But they really did struggle, and I mean, Crawley is now somewhat dining out on his 267 last summer.
Absolutely,
and he's going to have to back that up with another score fairly soon. Sibley is probably one of England's most selected players over the last couple of years, and by now you would hope that he would have settled into a groove. As we say, he went into this series not having played much cricket. He had a broken finger and so on, and he wasn't necessarily in great nick. So maybe he gets a reprieve.
I can't agree with that, Steve. I'm sorry to disagree with you, but he played very well. I mean, he played some exquisite shots, but he did not bat sensibly. I mean, if you've got to be, you're playing in a test team. And he played as if he was playing in a 50-over match, or shall we say the old Gillette 60-over matches, where he's got to build an inning stronger, especially now that he's batting 5 regularly. He's the core. He's the core of the batting, really. Joe Root stands alone. But somebody's got to stand alongside him, and Pope is the man who's got the talent and the ability to do it. But I almost think I could use the word irresponsible. It's lovely to watch, and you admire the shots he plays. But I have to say, I'm beginning to think he got the responsibility to play at 5.
Interesting point. We've got a fair few folk watching this evening, so keen for your thoughts on England's selection and on their performance in those 2 tests against New Zealand, and what you would do in the later test this summer with against India, and also your thoughts on the World Test Championship, on the women's test match that's underway, and also the England versus Sri Lanka T20s that are coming up. Loads to talk about. You got any views on any of those things? Send us a comment and let us know what you're thinking. One player we haven't really touched on at the moment, and I kind of almost don't want to because it's a bit difficult, is poor James Bracey.
Yes.
I was surprised you shared in the week with me a notion that he'd only kept wicket twice. Is it?
Unbelievable.
Before he went on the Lions tour. Yeah.
Before he was selected for the Lions tour, he had only kept twice in first-class cricket. I mean, is it any wonder that the poor lad was out of his depth? I mean, people I tend to underestimate the wicket keeping, especially if you're keeping to 4 pace bowlers when you're standing back all of the time, so that you don't really have to concentrate on stumpings or excellent reaction catches standing up. Poor Bracey. Well, I know I read an article by an ex-England wicketkeeper, Paul Nixon, and I read another one by Matt Pryor, and they both said that what happened with poor Bracey was he batted so well in county cricket. The selectors were desperate for somebody who could score a lot of runs, and so they chose to overlook his wicket-keeping abilities and selected him on the basis of a wicket-keeper batsman instead of a batsman wicket-keeper instead of a wicket-keeper batsman. And I think it has been proven through the years that you must have a more than adequate wicket-keeper. He sets the standard. He sets the standard in the field. If he keeps well and pulls off some great wicket-keeping catches or some good stops, the team respond to it in the field. If he lets unfortunate buys, shall we say, easily buys and drops some easy catches, then the fielders' shoulders drop and the standard of fielding drops.
And the fast bowlers' belief ebbs as well a little, doesn't it?
I mean, that's nothing more frustrating to a fast bowler than to have catches drop, particularly straightforward catches. I mean, Roots was, I mean, I'm not criticizing him because everybody drops one the same as everybody misses a penalty in football. But it's very frustrating for a bowler to see catches go down.
Yeah. So I guess I would say with Bracey, I did feel very sorry for him. I think he is renowned in the county game as well as having a very strong defence. I think the pressure of asking him to keep wicket didn't help his batting. He also normally bats in the top 3, so coming at number 7 was a different kind of experience for him as well. If you bat in the top 3, you normally be pads on at the start of the innings. You're ready to bat. You're in the zone. It is different batting down the order. And some people can switch and it doesn't bother them, and some people can't. So I felt very sorry for him. I hope he goes back to county cricket and scores a lot of runs, and he forces his way back in time as a specialist batsman in the top 3 with sound batting, with sound defensive technique and a good range of shots and a straight bat. Because frankly, somebody who could do that at the moment would be getting a look in the top 3. So Tony, Yeah, we've spoken a lot about the deficiencies and the problems with the England team. So let's think about what remedies. What could what's in place at the moment that can help, and what do you think ought to happen that will help England as a team?
I mean, obviously, it's very easy to criticise, and I've spent the last 20 minutes criticising, and really, as you know, behind the scenes, I've been very frustrated before that. But it's irresponsible merely to criticise and not be constructive in what you suggest. And I have one or two suggestions. And the first one I'll start with is pitches. Mm-hmm. The ECB made a good start towards trying to get batsmen to play longer and more responsible innings by restructuring the county championship. They made it 4 days. They gave extra points for a draw. And in other words, there was a lot of encouragement given by them for batsmen to play longer. But what they didn't do was give very strict instructions to the counties to provide 4-day wickets. It's no good if you have a 4-day match, and there have been plenty of them that finish in 2.5 days. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the timing of the county championship is all wrong. How can you expect batsmen in the early part of the season, in what shall we say, mid-April and early May, when there are green wickets and the ball is moving sideways and leaping off a length, how can you expect them to, shall we say, hunker down and lay the foundations of a good innings? You can't. Sooner or later, and probably sooner, they're going to get a jaffer. Even from a mediocre bowler, they're going to get a jaffer and they're going to get out. So what has happened is that they're structuring their thinking towards scoring runs before they get a jaffer. So they're playing what I would call a 50 over or white ball shots, and that's one of the reasons I think why they're taking off stump, middle and off. So if we get better pitches, better prepared, well covered before the cricket starts, so they're drier, I think that's the first step I would take.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about the impact of the wickets on batting technique, and I think it's a really good point that if batsmen think that there's going to be one with their name on it at any minute, so the thing is to cash in while you've got while you can. The knock-on effect of that, of course, is that people don't play themselves in. People don't wear down bowling attacks. That's right. They don't. And as you say, they pull out the funky shots, the reverse sweeps and the scoops and all of that malarkey. And actually, the thing that probably is the most problematic is the big booming drive from ball one, because they feel that
whereas in reality they should be leaving it alone and watching the pace and the swing of the ball. Mm-hmm. Get used to it.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting point. The batters kind of own targets and own aims for an innings then are changed from what you would expect from a long form game, rather than going out and saying, well, I'm going to build on it. Doesn't matter my scoring rate, particularly in my first 50 balls, because I'll make up for it if I'm batting for 200 balls. Then by that time I'll be going at 4 plus and over, because my eye will be in and the bowlers will be tired, and that's fine. So I think that's a really interesting point, and your point about the schedule as well, which is linked to that, of course, because in England in April and May, the dew and the moisture and the temperatures and so on do create pitches which are seamer friendly. Obviously, now this August we've got the 100, which is kind of plonked in the middle of the summer and is taking up that crucial real estate in the middle. But it would be good if the county championship was moved more to mid, although certainly large parts of it were moved to midsummer.
The second phase of the county championship is being played at the end of September, the beginning of October.
Yeah, I think there might be some games in July, but I think in the main it's going to be played much later.
Yeah, the majority is at the back end of the season when the ball will be moving around sideways again.
Yeah, because although it's not as warm, you've still got the moisture and the pitches will seem. Yeah, so there's certainly I think that's a really interesting point about the knock-on effect of the types of pitches that batsmen are batting on, and I guess if you overlay that with the increasing prevalence of white ball cricket. And the necessity to get on with it in those games and to tee off. And sometimes you're coming in, particularly if you're a middle order batsman, you've only got a couple of overs to face, and you're expected to try and score at 12 runs and over. So, you know, you're coming in at the death, and you got to swing, you know, swing from the hip sort of thing. So, yeah, it must be difficult for batsmen to gauge it correctly and to get themselves into the right muscle memory and the right frame of mind. And I really do wonder if in time cricket will develop in terms of, you know, there'll be more players like an Alistair Cook who said, well, I don't play the white ball game, I play red ball cricket, and there'll be more people that just play white ball cricket, and you'll end up with much more.
Rashid is doing already. Yes. Yeah.
That you end up with much more of a, you know, if you're a county, then you end up with effectively your red ball squad and the white ball squad, and there may well be very few people that move between the two in time, and you almost end up almost in a rugby situation where you've got two codes.
I think we all recognise that cricket needs the white ball game. It is commercial. The crowds love it. It is very attractive. It is not too long. It is over, so they don't have to sort of try and come back day after day. It's all right for the retired gentlemen with their straw hats on to sit in the stands at the Oval or Lords or something and watch a county championship and sip a few glasses of gin and tonic. But at the end of the day, we all recognise that cricket needs the revenue, needs the attractiveness that white ball cricket gives. But at the same time, Test match cricket is very, very popular, not just in this country, but certainly in Australia and the Indian subcontinent. It's perhaps waning a bit at the moment in the West Indies, but nevertheless, it is important. And if it is important, you also need something behind Test cricket to bring on the Test cricketers. And that's what in our land, that's what the county championship is there for.
Yeah, I agree. So there's lots of work to do for the England red ball kind of brains trust over the next little while. They've got to get out to the championship games. I think they've got to look for batsmen with the right sort of technique. They've got to look for spinners who've got something about their game. You know, if they can find a spinner who can bat, that's great. But I think probably one of the leading kind of next cab on the rank kind of spinner is probably Matt Parkinson of Lancashire, and I think he's a confirmed number 11, as is Verdi at Surrey as well. So they're not going to help the batting, but if they're good enough spinners, then that really doesn't matter.
Yes. I mean, we'll come on to talk about the T20 squad. Parkinson didn't make the T20 squad.
No.
So that tells us something.
Yeah, it does. So there's a lot to do there, but I think your point about Joe Root being overburdened with things is interesting.
That's my greatest worry. It really is my greatest worry, that the poor fellow will be burned out trying to do everything and be the best at everything.
Yeah, but you know, England looking forward to the India tests. Butler will be returned undoubtedly, so he can bat 6, no problem. It helps balance the side. Wokes, Sam Curran can bat at 7. If they're at 7 and 8, then that's a pretty strong middle order who are obviously top class bowlers. The likes of Bairstow could move back into the top 3 if that's what they wanted to do again. Maybe not. So a lot of the problems that England have faced, and Stokes of course may well be back to bat at 5 or bat at 6.
I heard Steve Harmison on the TV tonight saying that he's very close to return. Ben Stokes. Now he could possibly play, but will probably give it a little bit longer just to make sure that the fingers are okay. And incidentally, I heard that Bairstow today batted with a runner and did his ankle, so that is a concern maybe for the T20. But there are, Steve, a few other. I mean, young Taylor, who was brought in. Into the selectors, the ex-Nottinghamshire batsman. He's young, but he still has knowledge of the game. He's got a responsibility to tour the counties, looking for potential players whose technique is good enough to propel them into Test cricket. And I looked at. I mean, there's. And I've got 6 players down here who I think he should look at to see whether their technique. I don't see them in county cricket, but there's Hamid, there's Libby, there's Tom Abel of Somerset, there's Milan, and there's Carlson of Glamorgan and young cricket of Derbyshire, who also is a pretty good leg spinner. They should be looked at to see whether their technique is good enough for Test cricket.
For Test cricket, yeah, I think you're right. Well, Tony, we've thrashed the England team, as did New Zealand, around quite a lot in the last 29 minutes or so, last half an hour. But it wasn't the only team on show. The other team on show in those 2 Test matches, of course, was Kane Williamson's New Zealand side, and they line up against India starting tomorrow. That's Friday, the 18th of June, in the World Test Championship final at the slightly unusual venue of Southampton. I think picked for COVID-related reasons. So let's have a wee chat about that before we turn to New Zealand. India have actually quite unusually named their side a full day ahead of the match. So it's largely as you would expect. Rohit and Gill are opening. Pujara, Kohli, Rahane form the experienced and incredibly talented middle order. Pant comes in with fireworks at number 6, and then possibly the one of the selection is where would they go? Ravi Jadeja has been called into the side as one of the spinners, with Ashwin coming in as well. So obviously the choice there was between Jadeja, probably, and Akshar Patel, who obviously was far too good for England in the recent tour of India. And then the pace attack: Ishant Sharma, Mohammad Shami, Jasprit Bumrah, which is obviously a fantastic attack. And I think I'm right in saying that that's the first time those 5 players have ever been selected together. And I mean, there's not really a weakness in that Indian side, is there, Tony?
There isn't. I must admit, I'm very surprised, bearing in mind the weather forecast, which is not too favourable. The sun was due to, well, I think it's ended already with thunderstorms and heavy rain down in that area. So I'm a little bit surprised that they picked 2 spinners. Having said that, New Zealand batsmen are perhaps not used to playing too many spinners, because their conditions in New Zealand, where they played a lot of their Test cricket and most of their qualification was in New Zealand, has been against seam attacks. So it may be that there's enough in the Southampton wicket to give Ashwin and Jadeja a chance to ruffle their feathers, so to speak. But I mean, they've left out. India have left out. Then they've left out Yadav and Siraz. Siraz had a great time in Australia. They've opted for a more balanced team with three bowlers and 2 spinners. And good luck to them. I think they're sticking by their principles. They've got good spinners. They will play good spinners, and their motive, I think, must be that spinners can bowl on most wickets.
Well, when you're as good as Ashwin and Jadeja, you probably can. The other thing, of course,
Jadeja is a very good bat as well.
Yeah, so I was going to say, coming in at number 7, that's an incredibly strong batting lineup. Ashwin showed in the test against England that he's a wonderful batsman as well, can bat very effectively. So that's India with good batting down to number 8, and then a really, really strong and well balanced pace attack, and an experienced and very, very tricky spin pairing. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? And Kohli will be feeling confident. Again, he knows he goes into bat. He's got Rahane coming after him, who's dependable and experienced. He's coming in after Rohit, who's one of the great opening batsmen in world cricket at the moment. Young Gill, who's a fine player in Test matches.
Form a bit. He would be my only concern in that team, Gill. He had a poor series against us out in India, and he needs to maybe perform a bit better.
Yeah, but it's a very strong lineup. So India, incredibly strong lineup. I think you look at that team and you think, yeah, that's the number 1 team in the world. I can get that. I can understand that. And indeed, their performances in the World Test Championship were really, really fantastic. New Zealand, they've kind of got a squad of excellent players. They selected 15 for the game. So there's a few that have been left out and who definitely won't play. Santner, the spinner, won't play, and 1 or 2 others. I think Phillips, who may have been an option, coming in at number 7. Number 8 is their kind of all-rounder type. Yeah, they've been left out. But I think their top 6 probably selects itself in Latham, Conway, Kane Williamson, Taylor, Nichols, Watling, though of course Will Young did very, very well in the last test.
Yeah, yes, it did. I'd say he won't get in though. I think he'd be unlucky, and I think it would be between him and Taylor. And Taylor, having been out of form, this is the only difference. India are coming into this match cold. They have had no preparation. I presume they've had some behind closed doors preparation, but they have had no match preparation, whereas New Zealand have had two excellent matches from their point of view. I think that Young will be unlucky and he will miss out, as will Blundell, who will lose out to Watling in the keeping situation. I mean, I look at their team. They've got four absolutely top-class pace bowlers: Southey, Bolt, Wagner, and Jemison. And really, I think I'd be amazed if they don't play all four. And to my mind, the only choice then is between Patel and Grandholm for the fifth bowler. Patel being the spinner, and he played quite well against England. And Grandholm, who is a little bit of a Basil D'Oliveira type swing bowler, you know.
No, I agree. I think they will probably want the option of having Patel, because you wouldn't really want to be on a pitch which is taking turn, facing Jadeja and Ashwin, and then coming in, and then when it's your turn to get in the field, not having a spinner to turn to, that would probably be a bit sore for Kane Williamson. So I think Patel will probably play, and I think that probably means
it's a gamble because that lengthens the tail. That lengthens the tail.
It does. It does. Yeah, it does. But as we saw in the last test, Southey can bat a bit. Wagner, I keep calling him Wagner as well. Wagner can bat a bit. Jamieson can definitely bat. I mean, he would be able to bat at 7, I think. So it would be a little long. But yeah, so an interesting selection conundrum for the New Zealand captain and the New Zealand selectors. So we've got one already selected team which was very largely settled and lots of very good options. Another team which was, again, is largely, the batting lineup is largely settled. The question was, how do you want to balance your bowling attack? Do you think New Zealand, having had those two tests and being more kind of attuned to playing in English style conditions to play to their strengths, gives them the edge?
Yeah, I think if the weather is not, India must have prayed that the weather we've just had would continue. And if that had done so, I think I would favour India. But if the weather changes, which it looks like it's going to do, and it depends upon for how many days it changes and whether it passes through the south of England quickly, I would fancy New Zealand. So it's so difficult to call. When I look at the two teams, I think it's hard to beat either of them. They're really both absolutely top-notch teams. And I wouldn't like to call it, to be honest. I think it just depends upon the conditions. If it's a seam bowler conditions, I think that New Zealand's are better than India's. If it's a drier pitch, then Bumrah, who is fast, and the two Indian spinners I would favour. Batting, I think that maybe the one person I want to see how he goes in English conditions is Pant. I really am fascinated by that man. He's possibly got the cricket world at his feet. Not just as a keeper, but as a batsman. And if he is on song, India will be very hard to bowl out for a low score.
Yeah, and they will score their runs pretty quickly if he gets in as well. He goes like a steam train once he's got himself in. I think. I was thinking going into it that New Zealand's, with the English conditions, and I know Kohli got asked about that as well in the press conference. Don't the conditions in Southampton really play into New Zealand's hands? And he was quite dismissive of that, as he would be, and says, "Well, we can perform in any conditions." I was coming into it thinking New Zealand might have the edge, but you know what? Seeing that Indian team written down, I just think that's so strong, and they've got match winners. They've got, Rohit could win them the match. Pujara, Kohli could win them the match. Pant could win them the match. The spinners could win them the match. I just think, on balance, the Indian side is probably going to end up being too good, and I think Kohli will be proved right. And the conditions won't be as much of a factor because India is such a classy side.
Well, I would have to say, if India had to pick a location to play the match, they would choose the location it's being played in. I think it's their best bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just, because of the slight change in weather conditions, and it's only a just, favour New Zealand.
Well, there we go. Well, one of us will be right.
Yes,
if there's any India and New Zealand fans watching,
we're a superb program. We're never wrong.
Any Indian fans that we've had some Indian fans watching recently. Anyone from New Zealand? Let us know how you're feeling. Give us a rating out of 10. How likely you think your guys are to win this test if you're watching. Just let's see where the sentiment is out there in the cricket fan world. So there you go. I think India will edge it. I think Tony thinks New Zealand will edge it, but neither of us would be surprised if we were wrong. I think that's probably the fairest way to put it.
Absolutely right, yes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So
whatever is certain, I am certain it will be a great game of cricket.
Yeah, it will be a very high-class game of cricket. Yeah. Very, very good. Yeah. So the other international cricket that's on at the moment, or some others, loads on at the moment. England are about to play Sri Lanka in the T20s before we three meet again next week. Yes. That series will have started with a couple of games. I think the first two games, with a third to come following next week's show. The England squad's been selected. There's a few interesting things there. As you've mentioned, Johnny Bairstow's in this squad, but he injured his ankle yesterday and played with a runner. I think it's Phil Salt from Sussex that's been put on standby to replace him in the squad. Yeah, I believe so. That's interesting. I think Salt is a bit of a white ball specialist all around the world, and he plays. I think he plays in the Big Bash, and he does play in the Big Bash, and I think in the IPL as well. So he'll be an interesting choice. But of course, really it will be Roy and Bairstow probably opening up. Sam Billings is in the squad. The Curran brothers, Liam Livingstone, who I know we're very keen on this show, is also in the squad, and we hope he gets his chance because he's a fine player. But interesting in the bowling, there are probably two players that have been selected that I think is quite interesting. The first is the return of the Brommy Botham. Chris Wokes is back in the squad and hopefully will play. I think we've said before in the show that we slightly mystified at how he was treated over the winter, he's not nearly played enough cricket in England colours for a long time, and I hope he comes back.
He hasn't played enough cricket. Full stop.
Yeah. But if you remember back to the IPL that did get played, Wokes was bowling beautifully at the start of an innings in some of those games. Bowled really, really well. So it's great to see him back. As an England fan, I'm delighted to see him in. He's massively underrated, and I think he'll be raring to go. And the other player who's returned, who I didn't actually think I would see again selected in the England squad, is David Willey. Left armour, quick bowler, very a bit of a white ball specialist, and a not too shabby batsman either. I think has spent a fair bit of time opening in 20 over cricket.
And now playing for Yorkshire, of course.
Yeah, now playing for Yorkshire. So he's an interesting one to return. I think I'm right in saying Reece Topley is injured. So I think Topley had been in a lot of white ball squads fairly recently, and obviously was the left arm quick option. So Willie's only 31, so he's still got career ahead of him. And I hope he takes his opportunity. Mark Wood's another quick bowler that's in the squad too. As I say, we mentioned the Curran brothers, which are both.
You see, this is. I am surprised that Wood is in the squad. I think that Wood needs a rest. I know that people say, well, T20, you're not going to be doing too much, but I feel that he's had a lot of cricket, and he's got a lot of history of injuries, and I would hate to see him spoiled for by being overplayed. I would have Willie, Wokes, Jordan, and Sam Curran as my four front line bowlers. I noticed that my bête noire, who I can't have, Tom Curran, is also in the squad.
He is.
It'll be interesting to see whether he is picked. He has improved of late, but basically I'm still not confident about him. So I had a look at the team, and I thought that Bairstow and Roy, and then you've got Butler, and you've got Livingston, Morgan, and I would have Milan at 3 or 4, one of the two. I don't know whether I would have, but I'd have him in the team anyway. And I would have the difficulty I think they're going to have is choosing. Do they have both Rashid and Moeen? Moeen has played very well in the T20 counties this season. He's got a lot of runs batting at number 3, interestingly, and he's bowled reasonably well.
And he was on fire in the IPL with the bat and the ball as well. He was fantastic.
And I think he is the nominal vice captain as well. So I have a feeling that Moeen will play. And it then depends whether they have 2 spinners and pick Rashid, or whether they then go for the predominant pace attack of Willie, Wokes, Woods, Jordan, and Sam Curran. They've got Tom Curran. They've got Perman 4 from 6.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Morgan's the experience of Morgan is he likes to have his leg spinner in the team, doesn't he? And I think he trusts Rashid. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to get Moeen in the top 6 or 7, and then you have Rashid as well, and then you have 3 pacemen. Maybe that would be the way they would do it. You could have a very good long batting lineup if you did that. If you had those guys in the team, it'd be interesting to see. I guess again, also it might be a way for Morgan to mix and match some stuff, and see how different combinations work ahead of the World T20 later in the year as well. So.
If you look at playing Moeen and Rashid, then perhaps it doesn't bode too well for Livingstone.
Yes. Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Well, anyway, lots to look forward to there. So the first game's next Wednesday before we're back on the Cricket Fan Show next week. And indeed on Thursday during the day, it will probably be finishing just before we go live. So we'll be able to talk about that next week with what might be the deciding game or the third game of that series on the following Saturday. So lots to look forward to there. It'll be really interesting to see Morgan captaining a team as well, and get that England white ball team back out on the field looking good.
And there were signs of him coming back to form at the latter end of the sadly abruptly ended IPL. Let's hope he comes into good form as well, because there's nothing better than seeing Morgan in full flow.
Absolutely, yeah. Just what teams don't want to see is Owen Morgan coming in with a relatively small number of overs to go, and with the ability just to accelerate the innings when he gets in, and he does that, he's incredible. But the other England team that's been in action, they've been in action today, was the England women's Test team, and that's a good game in the making there. Actually, a really good game in the making. So
and I have to cut you off. Must be a good pitch. They're scoring good runs on it, and that is, I think, another advert for good pitches. Sorry to cut it off.
No, not at all. So England made close to 400, not quite 400. Heather Knight batted absolutely beautifully. I was watching some of her innings, and she really is a really wonderful driver of the ball. She a very, very balanced batter, really, really good. I was really impressed with Heather Knight's batting, as I always am when I see her. But again, it was a delight to see the women's game in the Test format, because very often they play the shortest forms of the game, and actually there's no reason why women's Test matches can't be every bit as compelling as any other form of cricket.
Well, I thought that the form of both teams benefited from it being a Test match.
I agree, and also Lauren Winfield-Hill, really powerful hitting over on the leg side as well, was really picking up the length of the Indian bowlers, and was really battering the leg side boundary and with some wonderful shots yesterday. So England would have been delighted. In fact, they declared just before they got to 400. And India had made a wonderful start. They were well over 100 without loss. I think 140 maybe without loss. 17-year-old Shafali Verma, who's making her Test debut, she scored 96 today. And a very impressive knock by all accounts as well. So India, as it would be to get 96 on your Test debut, so that bodes really well for Indian cricket. India ended the day 187 for 5, so they had a little bit of a wobble and a bit of a collapse today.
Yeah, they lost 2 wickets in about the last half an hour. Which was they sent in the night watchman, and the night watchman got out. and they sent in another one and they got out. So
So in fact the day ended with Mithali Raj coming into battle. I think they were all trying to protect, but she's still in overnight, so it'll be very interesting to see how that goes tomorrow, and that will be well worth watching if you can watch some of that game tomorrow.
I thought it was interesting also that the Indian spinners took 5 wickets. Rana took 3 of them and Deepti took 2. So the wicket is obviously suitable and justifying again the Indian male or female insistence on playing good spinners.
No, and I think the England team have got some good spinners in the side as well. Heather Knight bowls off breaks, and Sophie Eccleston is a left arm spinner, so that there's lots of good spin options there for England as well, which is good. So a good day ahead tomorrow. I think India will now be, obviously both teams probably looking at the follow on target, which is just still a little way away. All will probably depend on how much batting India have got in the lower order and the lower middle order, and how many people can hang around with Mithali Raj and make sure that she's got people to bat with, because obviously she's one of the women's games greats and is a fantastic player. But really, I had a look at some of the players' test records, and I just couldn't believe how few tests there are in women's cricket, and I think it's a crime, really. So look at this, Tony. Heather Knight made a test debut in 2011. That was in the 133rd women's test. So today she's playing in a 9th test.
Oh, right.
And that's the 141st
in 10 years.
Yeah, and that's but in overall women's cricket, it's the 141st Test match. So there's only been, like, I think she's only missed one of the tests that's been played in women's cricket in that time.
This has to be a commercial decision, I'm sure. The lack of it. They had this experiment. I don't know whether they've given it up, where they had a series which was made up of some tests, some 50 overs, and some T20s, which I thought was maybe a positive, from the commercial angle and the crowd angle.
Yes, I think they did the Ashes series like that last time. I think. But comparing to that, so she made her debut 10 years ago in the 133rd women's test, and today she's playing in the 141st women's test. She made a T20 debut in 2010 in the 90th T20, and she's played 81 T20s.
Oh, my goodness me!
And the last T20 was the 884th women's T20 international. So you can see there've been nearly 100 times more T20s get played in international cricket than women's tests.
The authorities have obviously nailed their colours to the mast as far as women's cricket is concerned, that it's predominantly going to be the white ball game then.
Yeah, and isn't that a shame? I think that's a real shame. Even Mithali Raj, it's only her 11th test, and she made a test debut in 2002. So I mean that's incredible, isn't it? And she's played.
I have to say, I don't know what the crowd was like. Was crowd allowed into this match?
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure it was.
You see, again, COVID is distorting these things, but it would have been interesting to see what sort of a crowd a good test. I mean, this is a good test. England versus India, and it would have been interesting to see what sort of a crowd it attracted, because at the end of the day, unfortunately for us purists, money talks, doesn't it?
It does. But anyway, I would say if you've got a chance over the next couple of days to catch any of the women's tests on TV, then I would heartily recommend it. Some of the batting on show has been absolutely fantastic, and indeed some of the catching has been very sharp as well. Some couple of cracking catches, but England took a cracker today, and India took some very sharp catches as well yesterday. So some good fielding on show as well. Certainly very, very good. So I think the Sports Fans TV Cricket Fan Show is saying more women's test matches, please. That's our position, and that's what we would like to see. And I think you're right, Tony. These mixed series where there's a couple of tests, couple of one-day internationals, and maybe 3 T20s or something might be a way to build more test matches into the women's game, because there's no reason why there shouldn't be more women's tests, I don't think, except perhaps for the economic imperative, and that's a shame. And I think the game needs support at this point rather than to be purely monetized. So there we go. Mac, we've covered a lot of ground this evening.
One more thing.
Oh, yes.
Are we going to touch upon the decline of West Indies cricket, apparently?
Because of course, yes. So yes, tomorrow the second West Indies South Africa test starts in the Caribbean. The first game was a bit of a battering for the West Indies. Unfortunately, all out for 97 and 162. South Africans only needed to bat once, and Quinton de Kock got 141, Tony, and 170 balls. That's some rate for a test. Not out, yeah. He could have gone on forever. And your mate, who leads the South African pace attack, Rabada, he took wickets in the game. Bowler I like
in the match. Nortje, who I prophesied would do very well in the IPL and didn't actually get a game, he took 7 wickets in the match. And then indeed he took 5 for 19 in the West Indies first innings. Yeah. And it's just one thing I wanted to emphasize about that. It shows you there is at the moment worldwide, because you look at the Indian pace attack, you look at the New Zealand pace attack, you look at the Australian pace attack, the South African pace attack, our pace attack, the swing, if you'll excuse the pun, towards pace is now becoming very pronounced the world over. And that South African pace attack, those three, they were almost unplayable. Only Chase, who scored 60 odd in the second innings, managed to get any runs against them.
No, and I think it's really interesting because it wasn't that long ago South Africa were really in the doldrums. I mean, they were struggling to put a test quality side out, but they've got a bowling attack they put together. They've now managed to find, I think, some top order batsmen to hang around with Dean Elgar a bit. And actually, and de Kock went through a bit of a trough, didn't he, when he was captaining, and it didn't really work out for him.
I noticed he batted a lot lower when he scored in this last match there. I think he came in at 5 for the win for South Africa. He was batting at 2 or 3 even.
Yeah, so another good test to look out for over the next few days. If you don't want to watch the World Test Championship final, you can keep one eye on the West Indies South Africa as well, because West Indies will be looking to come roaring back in that, I think. And the West Indies are developing quite an interesting team too, and it'd be interesting to see how some of their younger players, or some of their newer players, I should say, get on in the second test, and see how they respond to quite a heavy defeat. Because that's not easy in a series when you lose the first test very heavily. There we go. So thank you for reminding me about that test match, Tony. That was a good one to end on. So Mac, there we go. A bumper set of things to talk about tonight. We could have talked about all of those things for much longer, but there's so much to cover today.
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you so much. And lovely condensation of everything, really. There's a lot to cover, and you covered it at the best, as always. You boys are always absolutely top class. And I know people will watch this. Thank you for those who watched it live. There's quite a few of you. And thank you for those who will be listening or watching this after we've obviously done this. We do this every Thursday, 8 p.m. So come join us and leave comments. Like I said, we love to interact with everybody. So look, we've got a Twitter account at the bottom. And for those listening, it's at SFTV. So Sports Fans TV, at SFTV _cricket. So I'll say again, at SF, as in SFTV _cricket. I know Steve is always updating that. And Steve has got a few articles up on Medium as well, which I'll put in the show notes, which is always good to have a look at and have a read of those. So look, there's so much going on with the cricket. There's still plenty of cricket. It's summer. Tomorrow, it looks like it's going to be stormy weather in the UK. So as has always been alluded to by the boys, it may affect play tomorrow. But there's loads of other stuff going on. So keep in tune. And like I said, look, the Euros are on, but this is where you should be, listening to us talking about the cricket. This is where it's happening. We know, obviously, the big one's tomorrow, England, Scotland. But this is what it's all about. This is far more important than that game. The boys are up in Scotland. I'm here in England, and we can talk about it offline. But thank you for watching or listening to the Cricket Fan Show. Thanks as always, Steve, the cricket guy. Pleasure.
My pleasure. I've got two names I want to throw to people as well to look out for just before we go. Archie Lenham and Dan Ibrahim. Both these young lads, 16-year-olds, both of them, they both made their debuts for Sussex this last week and both did pretty damn well. And I wanted to mention them because they are living the thing that I dreamed about doing when I was a 16-year-old, of making my debut for a county and bowling well and batting well. I think Ibrahim scored a 50 and Lenham took some wickets with his leg spin.
Wow.
So I just wanted to throw those names out there because those are young lads starting their career, and hats off to them because they are, quite literally in my case, living the dream.
And hats off to the selectors who picked them for the county.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Fantastic. And any final thoughts from you, Tony?
No. I offer a little bit of post-operative apologies, if you like, for my outburst, but about the performance of the England Test team. But at least we did try and counter it by suggesting some remedies and some ways to go.
Yeah, well, we love honesty, and that's what it's about, just putting your heart out there and letting the viewers decide what they think about the response. So it's all good. But thanks as always, Tony. Thank you as well. So thanks as always. Thanks for everything. And look, we're always grateful for your comments. Always grateful for you joining us. It's always a pleasure. Come join us again. We'll be here next Thursday. We're here every Thursday through the summer. So join us throughout all of the cricket season. We will be doing all kinds of things throughout the summer, but the main thing is they'll be doing this Cricket Fan Show. So come join us every Thursday, leave some comments. Thank you for watching the Cricket Fan Show, and we'll sign off now. Enjoy the rest of your week.